From the beginning you were told a story, that she was divine, that her love was softer, truer, more healing than anything the world could offer, that she was your shelter, your muse, your salvation. And you believed it. Everyone did. Every story, every film, every whisper in your boyhood imagination built her into something sacred. She was the one you were meant to protect, adore, worship. And you, what were you? The seeker, the servant, the man reaching outward for completion. You were taught to chase, to kneel, to prove. But what if the story itself was never meant to guide you, but to blind you? What if the woman you adored was never a savior, but a strategist? What if her softness wasn't sincerity but survival? What if all the warmth you saw in her was shaped not by emotion, but by necessity? She is not a divine mystery. She is a mirror, not of your missing piece but of your misunderstanding. And when you begin to see her clearly, not through poetry but through pattern, something in you starts to crack, because you begin to realize you were never in love with her. You were in love with your own projection, and she, sensing your hunger, played the role perfectly, not maliciously, not even consciously perhaps, but precisely. She adapted, because that's what those without structural power do. They adapt, they mirror, they survive. And in a man's world where force was once everything, her power came not through confrontation but calibration. You gave her your truth, your secrets, your wounds, and she remembered. Not as a gesture of care but as a form of leverage. While you confessed, she listened, not emotionally but strategically. While you sought closeness, she scanned for patterns. This isn't about evil, it's about design. She did not create the game, she learned it. When men were building empires, she was building relevance. You see her as emotional, but she is precise. She reads tone, silence, hesitation. She remembers what makes you feel small. She registers your pauses and your uncertainty. Every compliment, every withdrawal, every confession from you became data. And with that data, she carved out space, not to overpower but to become indispensable. You thought love meant surrender. You thought it meant offering all of yourself, exposing every vulnerability. But she wasn't loving you. She was positioning herself. And when you gave her everything, you weren't offering strength. You were offering obedience. The pedestal you built didn't elevate her, it disarmed you. She didn't have to control you. You handed her the reins yourself, thinking love demanded it, thinking submission would win you closeness. But what you called romance was dependency. What you called connection was worship. What you called intimacy was your own reflection bouncing back at you, shaped by a woman who knew exactly how to keep you believing. She didn't need to be forceful. She only needed to be what you needed her to be. She became the rhythm to which your emotional heartbeat danced, and you called that chemistry. But chemistry doesn't memorize your flaws. She does. You thought she was fragile. She wasn't. She was studying. You thought she needed you. She didn't. She needed access. You thought you were the protector, but she was already inside your mind, shaping your behavior through silence, softness, suggestion. She knew what you feared. She knew what you craved. And she knew that if she could reflect those cravings just well enough, you'd never question her. You'd defend her. You'd idealize her. You'd hand her the blueprint to your psyche and beg her to hold it gently. She doesn't want your strength. She wants your rhythm. She doesn't need to dominate your body. She wants to inhabit your thoughts, and she does. She becomes the voice you hear before making a decision, the comfort you seek after failure, the presence you crave when you feel lost. You built her into your anchor, never realizing she was floating the entire time, not rooted in love but in adaptation. When you finally realize this, when you begin to see that the kindness you worshipped was performance, that her gentleness had a purpose, you start to break. Not because she fooled you, but because you fooled yourself. You needed her to be pure. You needed her to be soft. You needed her to save you from the chaos inside yourself. And she knew it. That's why she never corrected the illusion. Because the illusion served her. Why would she dismantle a myth that grants her power without responsibility? Why would she challenge a fantasy that lets her rule without declaring control? You call her mystery. You say she's hard to understand. But the truth is, she's not hiding. You're just refusing to look. Because to look would mean confronting the possibility that the love you built your life around was never real, that it was a story she helped you write. And once that story ends, what remains? You thought she left, you thought she changed, but maybe she didn't change at all. Maybe the role ended. Maybe the version of her you loved expired the moment it no longer served her purpose. And suddenly you realize, she never needed to dominate you. She only needed to reflect the version of her that kept you obedient. When she no longer needed that version, she stopped performing. And what you called heartbreak was really the collapse of a fantasy, not her departure, but your disorientation. You didn't lose love, you lost your role. You lost the man you pretended to be for her gaze. And that man, that mask, is what you're mourning. Because once she stopped performing, you had nothing left to reflect, nothing left to orbit. And for the first time, you were face to face with yourself, without her validation, without her warmth, without her script. You were hollow, not because she took something from you, but because you never built anything of your own. She was the architecture of your self-worth. And now, without her, you are standing inside ruins that were never truly yours. The attention she gave you, the approval you chased, none of it was for you. It was for the version of you that served her needs. And once it didn't, it was discarded. She didn't lie. You simply never asked. You never questioned why she smiled when you were weak, why she leaned in when you felt broken, why her affection came in rhythms that mirrored your insecurity. She didn't deceive you. You deceived yourself. You mistook performance for presence. You mistook calibration for care. And now you find yourself unraveling, not because she left, but because everything she touched was tied to the image of you that only existed through her reflection. When she looked away, that image shattered. You didn't lose a woman. You lost the illusion of your worth, the illusion of your identity, the illusion of your strength, all of which had been outsourced to her approval. You call her manipulative, but she didn't twist your arm. You offered it. You gave her your patterns, you gave her your rhythm. You handed her your vulnerability and called it love, hoping she'd turn it into purpose. But she didn't. She archived it. She memorized it. And when the time came, she moved without you. Not because she betrayed you, but because she was never really with you. She was around you, circling, calculating, centering herself inside the role you created and then walking out when it no longer served her. And that is not evil. That is nature. You can't accept that because you were raised on poetry. You were told she would complete you, that her softness would save you, that her gaze would heal what you were too afraid to face on your own. But she was never there to heal you. She was there to witness how much of yourself you'd give away for the illusion of being chosen. And you gave it all, willingly, eagerly, desperately, not for love, but for approval, for permission to believe you were enough. And now that she's gone, you're not grieving her. You're grieving the permission, the mirror, the pedestal you built, which always had more to do with you than with her. You were never in love. You were in longing. And she, sensing that longing, became its reflection, not its answer. She shaped herself into what your hunger needed. And when she no longer needed you, she vanished. And you, left with the echo of your own illusion, call it heartbreak. But this isn't heartbreak, it's awakening. It's the first breath you've taken outside the mythology of her softness. And now you're here confused, unanchored, not because she betrayed you, but because you see clearly for the first time. You see that you were never whole, that you used her to avoid the work of becoming, that you made her the scaffolding of your identity, and now that it's gone, you have to build yourself. Alone, unaided, unapproved. That silence you feel now, that absence, that's not a punishment, that's your foundation. That is where the real begins, because now finally you ask, who am I without her? Who am I without the gaze, the script, the validation? Who am I without the role I played to be adored? And that is where the real man begins. Now you're standing in silence, not because you've been silenced, but because for the first time there's no script to follow, no role to perform, no gaze to mold yourself for. The woman you once worshipped has stepped back, and in the space she left behind there is no closure, no explanation, just raw air and your reflection staring back without a mask. And you realize something you were never taught to understand. You weren't loving her. You were escaping yourself. Everything you believed was love, the devotion, the desire, the sacrifice, wasn't really about her. It was about the comfort of outsourcing meaning. The fantasy that someone else could name you, define you, validate you. But now the pedestal has cracked, the story has collapsed, and the mirror is gone. And what do you find? Not loss, not betrayal. Just the hollow truth that you never built a self outside her presence. You borrowed identity. You borrowed purpose. You called it connection, but it was captivity. And now that you are free, it feels like death. You were never hers. You were never even yours. You were a man shaped by need, longing, and approval. And now, in the quiet aftermath, you are faced with the one question no one ever prepared you for. Who are you when there is no one to impress? When there is no one to rescue? When there is no one to validate your masculinity with a kiss on the forehead and a whisper that you are enough? This is where most men retreat, back into performance, back into illusion, back into another woman who promises to reflect a better version. But if you resist that pull, if you hold yourself in the discomfort, you will begin to see something extraordinary. That beneath the ache, beneath the narrative, beneath the need to be seen, there is a truth that cannot be taken from you. A truth not built in response to her affection, but rooted in your own clarity. That you do not need to be worshipped to be worthy. That you do not need to be needed to be whole. You were taught that love would save you, that partnership would complete you, but love is not completion. It is not surrender. It is not the offering of your identity on the altar of feminine approval. Real love begins when you no longer need it to validate your existence. When you can walk toward a woman not to be filled, but to share the overflow of a self already forged in solitude. She will test this. She will test your edges. Because the moment you stop orbiting her gravity, the balance shifts. She'll sense it. She'll probe, not out of cruelty, but out of instinct. She wants to know, are you still the man who kneels? Are you still the man who trades himself for closeness? Or have you become something else, someone sovereign? Because the sovereign man is not seduced by softness. He sees through it. He's not swayed by neediness wrapped in flattery. He is unmoved by the drama of emotional puppetry, not because he is cold, but because he is centered. His presence is no longer for sale. His truth is no longer negotiable. He listens not to be molded, but to understand. He gives not to be praised, but to align with principle. And she feels this, and she must choose, continue the performance or meet him in reality. But this meeting, this unfiltered confrontation between man and woman without illusion, is rare, because most never make it this far. Most remain caught in cycles of dependence, storytelling, and emotional transaction. They confuse vulnerability with leverage, affection with strategy, and kindness with control. But when you let the myth burn, when you no longer need her to be your savior, you open the possibility of seeing her clearly, not as a goddess, not as a manipulator, as a human, complex, strategic, responsive, neither victim nor villain, just someone designed to survive by learning how to reflect. This doesn't make her less, it makes her different. And difference, when unacknowledged, becomes distortion. You thought her mystery made her superior. It didn't. It made her elusive because you refused to accept her reality. And her reality is that she learned early. Power isn't given to women, it's taken subtly. Not through dominance, but through emotional literacy. She studied you, not because she loved you, but because she needed to understand how to matter in your world. How to become irreplaceable in a structure that never offered her the keys. And you mistook this mastery for magic. You thought her emotional intuition was evidence of deeper love, but it was evidence of deeper strategy. When she noticed your tone shift, your words stutter, your gaze drop, she registered it like code. Because whoever controls the emotional language controls the narrative. And she was fluent before you even learned the alphabet of your own psyche. But now, here you are, the story exposed, the illusion scorched, and still you wonder, was any of it real? The answer is painful. It was real in its impact. It was real in your body, but it was never real in the way you imagined. It wasn't soul meeting soul. It was pattern meeting opportunity. You showed her your need and she adapted to it. You offered her a role and she played it. And when the role no longer served, she changed the script, not because she betrayed you, but because she was never bound to the story like you were. You can call this manipulation, but you must also call it evolution. She didn't do this to hurt you. She did it to exist in a world where presence alone wasn't enough, where softness was currency, where strategy replaced strength. You conquered with fire and fists. She conquered with silence and gaze. And while you claimed power with steel, she claimed it with shadows, not out of weakness, but out of instinct. You don't have to hate her for this. You don't have to punish her in your mind. You just have to stop confusing your fantasy with her reality. You have to stop making her a character in your redemptive arc. She was never here to complete you. She was here to mirror you. And the man she reflected, he wasn't whole. He was hollow. And that hollowness is what you now have to face. But this is where your reconstruction begins. Because the man who is no longer seeking softness to soothe his insecurity is the man who can finally build self-respect, build direction, build values that do not bend with affection. He doesn't need a woman's gaze to feel visible. He doesn't need her admiration to validate his effort. He doesn't need her approval to feel like a man. And when you become this, when you're no longer orbiting a woman's emotional gravity, something profound happens. She either collapses back into strategy or she rises. She meets you at eye level, not in performance but in presence. And for the first time, there is no power game, no leverage, no manipulation. There is just truth. And maybe it's raw, maybe it's uncomfortable, maybe it lacks the thrill of the pedestal, but it is real. And if she can't meet you there, you let her go. Not in anger, in clarity, because you no longer chase reflections. You no longer sacrifice your center to be chosen. You no longer trade sovereignty for romance. And now everything changes. You don't get pulled into emotional spirals. You don't explain yourself to be understood. You speak to be heard, and if you're not heard, you don't chase. You retreat, you recenter. You remember that your core is no longer a performance, it's a presence. This is not about becoming heartless. It's about becoming fearless, not emotionless, but emotionally precise. You feel deeply, but your feelings don't lead you. You love with fullness, but never with surrender of self. You can hold space for her pain without losing yourself in it. You can support her without dissolving. You can walk beside her, not beneath her pedestal or in front of it, but side by side. And this is the end of the myth. The myth that told you love was sacrifice, that strength was submission, that devotion meant erasure, that her affection was your reward for playing the obedient role. That man is gone, the man who needed to be enough, the man who confused attention with identity, the man who traded sovereignty for intimacy. That man died when she stopped reflecting him. And what remains now is the man who no longer fears the silence of being unseen. Because in that silence he found himself. This is the man she can't control. This is the man she can't mold. This is the man who doesn't need her love to feel whole. And ironically, this is the man she may finally respect. Not because he gives her everything, but because he needs nothing. Not from her, not from her approval, not from the role she once played in the story of his worth. This is not a return to cruelty. It's a return to clarity. You can still love. You can still open, you can still be gentle, but now you choose it. It's no longer reflex, it's no longer strategy, it's no longer trade, it's truth. And when love emerges from truth, not illusion, it does not bind, it does not control, it does not collapse under pressure. It breathes, it expands, it frees both of you from the burden of being each other's savior. And finally, you are two humans, not gods, not archetypes, meeting without performance. So let the myth burn, let the performance end, let the pedestal crack, let the illusion die, and in the ashes let something real be born. Not a love that fills your void, but a love that honors your fullness. Not a gaze that defines you, but one that sees you. Not control, not chaos, but presence, unfiltered, unbent, unowned. And if you've come this far, let these words land in your bones. You are not here to be worshipped or to worship. You are here to see and be seen. to build a self that no longer needs a mirror to feel alive. And when that man walks through the world, he no longer chases softness, he carries strength, and she, if she's ready, will meet him there. If this opens something in you, sit with it. Let the silence after the illusion speak louder than the voices that raised you. And know this, the man who no longer needs to be completed is finally ready to connect.